Hello, everyone. I am John O'Loughlin. This is McDuff Lives. Welcome back. And it's so great to have David Cranmer Underdown back. So let's get started, eh? My friend David Cranmer Underdown, welcome back. Thank you for joining me this morning.
It's good to be back.
It's good to see you. And I asked you over the weekend what topic you would like to talk about, and with all the things that have been pressing on my mind, this was not one of them. I actually really kind of am new to this subject. It's about a part of a 1994 law about communications. There was a Communications Act, and it has a section called 230. And this section 230 has been the magic dust that has allowed things like YouTube and all kinds of interactions that have been going on the internet ever since then, precisely because it limits liability. It limits liability in such a way that the providers of these platforms don't have to worry about what the content is said by somebody else. It's all good. However, it runs up against some interesting barriers when you talk about national sovereignty and what can a government of the U.S. or France or Russia or anywhere else do to restrict AI and general internet connectivity so that its citizens don't get any quote unquote misinformation.
That's right. And I think that to me, what the law is, it's not a shielding of liability. It's a passing of liability to the user, and then protecting the government, the Senate, which has speech and debate protection that allows them not to be immune from surety bond checks on their duty of care and their sworn duty to the Constitution, where they have upgraded responsibility to have the to avoid the appearance of impropriety and the public's right to know. So it becomes a discussion between national security and trusting the people that have liability protection in their word, and then the people that are receiving the information and acting on it and making decisions. And Mark Warner, of course, is the champion of Section 230, and he's the senator from Virginia, and he is also the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which was the group that was dealing with the Christopher Steele dossier. And Mark Warner was using a back channel of a Signal communications with a lawyer named Adam Waldman, who represented Oleg Deripaska. And he, rather than using transparency and showing why this was a national security issue, he instead used language saying he wanted to erase the audit trail of these communications. And to me, that's a violation of his sworn oath to uphold the the First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments of the people. And so, to me, that's a problem in the way the system and the rule book is written right now. And my proposal for fixing this is the senator from my state that represents me, Alyssa Slotkin, who I went to school with her brother. She just came out yesterday saying that she is in favor of removal of the presidential immunity and getting rid of that protection with the executive branch. My proposal for Alyssa is to upgrade that and to throw her speech and debate of the Senate on the table as a good faith action to say, you're going to give up your way to protect people legally, and we're going to give up ours at the same time, because the spirit of this is the sovereignty of the people and the rights of the people. So that was why I want to talk about this, because it's also been upgraded, because there's new legislation, the AI Sovereignty Act, which has been offered by Eugene Vindman, who is a senator from Florida, and his brother is Alexander Vindman, that people may remember from the impeachment trial, the first impeachment trial.
And ran for Congress in Virginia.
And he's a current congressman in the state of Virginia right now, exactly. And so they're the stewards of this legislation, and I feel like that every character involved has massive conflict of interest, and that's why I wanted to discuss this today, because I feel the only solution to this is to discuss it and educate people about what's going on and who the characters are and what the options are, and not to fall into the trap that it's only A or B, and that there can be more solutions. And that's what I was hoping to discuss with you, because I know you have a career in law and the Constitution. Of course, you talk about your father's role with the SACSA, and the idea that national security requires these actions outside of the normal constitutional protections, and to come up with ways to test and ensure that these things are overseen, and that there is an inspector general that's making sure that all the characters are accountable. And historically, the surety bond and insurance is the way to get into the to break the corporate seal, so to speak, to bring in a third party to evaluate the are the characters upholding their sworn duty, and are they insurable, and if not, then they default. So to me, that's the solution. That's the non-kinetic solution, where you use law and common understanding and debate and common agreement on what the best solution is.
Stepping back to a kind of a global view of my observations over the past week or two, it looks to me like the American people are starting to wake up to the fact that their news is controlled, and that there is an awful lot of horrible things going on behind the scenes that are becoming impossible to avoid. That yeah, there is trafficking in children. Yeah, Jeffrey Epstein was a bad man. What happened is these things grew out of World War II, national security concerns, fear of the communists, and the creation of national security in SC 10/2, which basically says that spooks can do illegal things as long as they have set up a system of plausible deniability in which they will never get caught. And then on top of that, in 10/2 gives them a backup by saying, well, if they can't maintain plausibility, then the government will step in and provide deniability from the whole government. And that was done for the Dulles brothers in 1950, 51 too. And we've lived under that ever since. And they might have, thought of it, okay, we're going to have to kill some people to take over Guatemala or Iran or something, or we're going to have to make some kind of arms deals with somebody in the Middle East, or as we want to call it now, Southwest Asia. But we want to do something that's illegal, but it's for national security, so we need an out. So we're going to rely on this NSC 10/2 that says we can do it. And so it's just grown from there. So there's nothing that you cannot do as long as you have plausible deniability, and that right now the walls are crumbling on that plausible deniability around this trafficking stuff. Now, my answer is to immediately pass a law that repeals this executive order from the 50s and says no, you cannot do illegal things anymore. Your license to kill is expired. We don't need James Bond in this world. We don't need these people that are trading horrible things back and forth for so-called national security. If our national security depends upon this kind of trafficking, then it's not worth it. Uh, I am sick. I'm just so sick and tired of it. That to go into the regulation of the internet and AI, as we were talking about, in fine detail, in order to try to put some responsibility where it belongs, and that is, the people that are allowing this to happen, the cover-up people, the Congress, and the people that do it, and if they don't have responsibility, which they don't, and this Section 230 appears to me be written on behalf of the people that have already committed themselves to doing illegal stuff under NSC 10/2. I think that it's until we face the fact that we are committing horrible, immoral crimes around the world in the name of national security, and say, wait, do we really have to do that? Maybe you had to do it in 1953. I don't know, but you do not have to do it in this world today. And if you do, then it's got to be exposed, and we've got to shame it and make it stop somehow. And I don't know if legislation is going to do anything. So, now I'm very new to this subject, and
Yeah.
just like I say, I'm just giving you a global step back reaction
Yeah.
for the sake of letting you fine tune. I mean, what exactly is a way that you could pin liability on the people that are doing these things? Because it's all spooks. It's if it's not a spook, it's a spook cutout. So I don't know.
Well, you talked about Friday, the data centers, and that's directly that's the build out of what this system is. They need these data centers in order to process all of the computation of Palantir and all of the cameras, and gathering the data from every social media and all of these, kind of the um, Prism project that was discussed. That's where you need all this compute power. And so what's happened is they've done ex parte permits to build out these data centers under the pretext that it's national security, and that if we don't do these, then we have a national security issue with China and Russia that will diminish our security if we don't provide these data centers. And what they've done is with an ex parte permit, which means they avoid the normal oversight. In the state of Michigan, where I live, they're building a $7 billion data center in Saline, Michigan, and that is being done under ex parte. And Whitmer signed it um, under the when we were under the combination of the COVID national emergency, but also she had the personal FBI
Yeah.
capture, which is absolutely a pretext for this data center, saying, look, our governor was threatened by these, because if you remember the 2016 Russiagate, which Mark Warner was, this is what his texting was about, the Oleg Deripaska, who was involved in the auto bailout in '98 as well. People remember Bob Dole, and the same Jonathan Weiner that was doing the passing of the dossier were the same people that signed special exemption for Oleg Deripaska to be able to participate in those negotiations. So these are the same characters over and over again, but with this data center, they've included the Trump's uh, Stargate program, which is the combination of the SoftBank, which is Japanese, and then they have Larry Ellison, who's Oracle, and then there is Sam Altman from OpenAI that people know with Larry Summers going in there. They have the Suchir Biology murder situation. This is Elon Musk suing OpenAI. That's who's doing this data center. And then the builder of it is Walbridge. That's the Rakolta family that I've talked a lot about. They're the in-laws of Mitt Romney. And I, again, went to, my ski team mates married two of the daughters, and my dad went to high school with Terry Rakolta, who did the, Fox Married with Children, morality play, the same as Tipper Gore and Jim Baker's wife for music. They did it for television. So you have the same characters that are involved. And then Stephen Ross is the other person. Stephen Ross is the nephew of Max Fisher, and he is the person that has a long history with Donald Trump. He was he bought the New Jersey Generals with Trump in the 80s. They did the 30 Hudson Yard project together. People remember in the 2016 when Roger Stone was meeting with Michael Caputo with this Russian informant named Nyansky. He was, with the with Ross's company. So again, this is the same, network, and so that's why for me, personally, it's just like it hits so close to home because these are all the characters. So that's why, when I was in high school and I was in a homeroom and I had the granddaughters of the person that owned Lionel Trains was in my class. They're very quiet girls, but their grandpa was Richard Kuhn. And Richard Kuhn was the first employee of Alfred Taubman at Taubman. Taubman was the mentor to Leslie Wexner. Wexner had the retail. Taubman had built out the mall spaces. So Taubman and Max Fisher were very close. And, so it's, and these are the founders of the mega group with Charles Brofman and what we were talking about with the trafficking angle. Well, the thing that I think of is immediately Southern Air Transport, right? It moved from Florida to to Columbus, Ohio for Wexner to manage that, and that comes out of the Charles Cabal, George Duell. That's the Pacific Corporation that did all of the CIA, Flying Tigers, all that stuff. It was from there, and then kind of the overall entry point. I think that's so important is point four. Point four was the precursor to the USAID. It was a program that was in Central and South America. It was run by Nelson Rockefeller. It turned into the Inter-America Company. It was simultaneous when Henry Kissinger is running the Special Studies program for Rockefeller Brothers. That the financial people that were the architects of it was the Chicago Boys. So it was Milton Friedman. The Clark Clifford, the personal lawyer for Truman, was also the person that spearheaded it. That's the same person that said George Marshall and Forrestal were the anti-Semitic and didn't want to recognize Israel. So that was another Clark Clifford moment, and it shows his relationship with Israel. And then he also had Bill Casey was also the accountant, and Casey later comes back and is part of the Iran Contra. He was the Commerce Secretary for the 72, the Republican campaign contributions. He was in the middle of that, and he was the one that died right during the BCCI hearings. And Mike Benz that you talk about is just, he's doing the expose on how Jeff Epstein at Bear Stearns was running the BCCI account with Adnan Khashoggi at Bear Stearns. And so that's history of that. And when BCCI collapsed, of course, Clark Clifford was the chairman that went down in flames after the long career. And then there was Robert Altman, who was the other partner in BCCI, and he started ZeniMax, which was, became a video game company. It had Donald Trump's brother work there, Robert Trump, the person that was sort of the main wrangler for the Clinton Foundation, that I couldn't say for so long, Terry McAuliffe. He was on ZeniMax, and then he became kind of the bundler for the Clinton Foundation, which of course has the Mark Rich pardon history and Denise Rich doing the initial donation for that. So this is where these Epstein, Wexner mega group, Clinton Global, Clinton Global Initiative was Doug Band, who was the right-hand man of Bill Clinton. He bought David Rockefeller's, apartment in New York. So, this is the Rockefeller, connection. And again, we've talked about this a lot. British security coordination with Big Bill and Little Bill was in the RCA building, which was 30 Rock. That is where the Rockettes are, and Radio City, and all the, you can go right across. If you're Catholic, you can see St. Patrick's Cathedral, which is absolutely beautiful. That's all right there. That was where the Rockefellers anchored.
Let's go back. We have to build our AI, because if we don't, we're going to get behind. It sounds like the nuclear arms race. We have to build more bombs than the Soviets, because the Soviets will get ahead of us, and then we'll lose the nuclear arms race, and they will control us. It's, from my research before the show, it appears to be that China is the big threat, that China is doing AI, 10 times faster than we are, and the idea is it's dependent upon how much data they can bring into their system. So with everybody in China open to them grabbing the data off of their devices, they've got, 1 billion more people. And it seems to me that the idea behind it is this thinking of pre-crime, that we need to see what people are thinking about, because you say Mark Warner, that it reminds me of Charlottesville and the crazy torch march from the people that got off the buses and handed out the torches and walked down the street saying blood and soil. And, the idea of scaring, poor Virginia into thinking that the right-wing nutcases are going to burn down their cities. That kind of tactic, is all about, problem, reaction, solution, the Hegelian dialect. And, oh, you have a problem. Oh my gosh, you guys should be scared. We're scared. Oh, here's the solution. Oh, thank you so much. All of this happens in another point that I wanted to make from what you were saying when we talk about BCCI and all the money involved in this. I think the spook economy is bigger than the real economy. I think that there's so much money involved in these programs that are protected under 10/2 national security, that they can make a whole lot more money by doing that stuff than they can by being straight. And maybe that's one of the reasons why we don't have productive industry in this country like we should. Of course, another reason is all of the regulations that have been passed to make sure that you don't build another steel mill, and you don't, have a chance to build up some product that you could invent. That everything is now getting divided between people who are dependent upon checks from the central authority, or people who are wealthy enough not to care. The destruction of our middle class has been, I think, the intention. And that tells me who's doing it, and that is the elites that are running those oil companies that we talk about, or that are running that are in charge of the banks and the Rockefellers and the governments and the Rothschilds and the royalty and all of this, all the people that we try to point to as the real powers behind what's going on. And so I just want people to wake up to the fact that it didn't always have to be this way. And the assassination of President Kennedy was absolutely necessary for this to develop. If we don't go back and say, look, let's unpack that. If we don't unpack that and say, look who won, cui bonis, and look at what they've done since then. We haven't had a real president that looks out for the American people. They've all been captives. It's all been presidential puppetry, as our friend Andy Craig called his book, which is really an excellent introduction into this horrible problem. So yeah, I think they want us to think that AI is inevitable. The singularity is coming. All of our minds, it's going to be mind meld everywhere, and we don't want that. I mean, we just don't want it, and they're going to push it on us. And these are just mechanisms that they use to create that wonderful panopticon of everybody's a criminal until proven otherwise, and we're going to make sure and keep an eye on them because they do come up with these evil ideas. Those worthless eaters.
Well, the In-Q-Tel is the company or the organization that people should be aware of. It's the CIA's investment arm that's not technically part of the CIA, but what an advantage to have in regulation of a company to be affiliated with, to have a national security pretext is a wonderful loophole that they've made. And if you follow the history of that was George Tenet that started that. He was the one that came up with the plan for the Bin Laden station with Cofer Black and all those guys, which are now ends up at Burisma later, with Hunter Biden. The other thing that I wanted to show that is Peter Thiel is somebody to really look at, because he of course is a Palantir founder. He's known as the Don Corleone of the PayPal Mafia, which was a whiz kid, reboot of the Ford whiz kids, and the idea of these super genius kids from Harvard and MIT. And so the Golden Dome is sort of that's the product right now that's trying to be sold globally to provide this AI, working in concert. So you have a hardware component and a software component. And the hardware is called Golden Dome, and that's basically an amalgamation of military contractors like Lockheed and Raytheon and whatnot. And again, that's another thing that is critical to remember, is that Vannevar Bush was a founder of Raytheon. And again, that gets forgotten, I think, because people think of him as the National Defense Research Committee, which did the Manhattan Project at MIT. He also became the chairman of Merck after George Merck died, which people remember George Merck was running the biological weapons program during World War II after Merck had been seized by Mitchell Palmer in 1918 and then was sold by the US government to Goldman Sachs and Lehman Brothers and George Merck. So you have that uncomfortable connection, because the major influence for FDR was Henry Morgenthau. Morgenthau's wife, Fatty Lehman, was the granddaughter of the founder of Lehman Brothers. So Robert Morgenthau, who was a mentor to everybody, including RFK as the Attorney General, later a whole generation of Southern District of New York lawyers were inspired by Robert Morgenthau, who was the person that ended BCCI. If you remember, he was the head of that. So it's the same connections of that. And then with Raytheon, you have the or with Lockheed, that was again part of Detroit Aircraft Company. Detroit went bankrupt in 33, and then Lockheed broke apart. It went back to California, and then they had the U2, Sidney Gottlieb. They had this Mulholland that was doing the CIA. He wrote the manual on deception, and he was a magician. I mean, literally, he was the head of the magic circle. He did all of the costumes and makeup and everything for the CIA. Is this Mulholland that worked with Sidney Gottlieb, and of course, Gottlieb was at Camp King with Kissinger, and was a young person translating for Allen Dulles in 1948 at Camp King, when you had Sidney Gottlieb, starting, and then you had the I forget the name of the other guy that worked with Adnan Khashoggi, but that's where a lot of these things started, and then of course Gottlieb was involved in the assassinations with Lumumba. You had Frank Carlucci was in Congo for that. That's Donald Rumsfeld's college roommate at Princeton, and then Rumsfeld was taking classes at Columbia, or at University of Chicago, Milton Friedman. So this whole Chicago Boys concept, which goes to Chile and is doing the death squads and all this in concert with the idea of creating a new modern economy and giving them modern banking tools and all these things. That was that was what they did. And then the stewards of that program was the Harvard, HIID, Institute for International Development. And that was Larry Summers and Jeffrey Sachs that ran that. And they did the solidarity in Poland. They did all of the former satellite countries. They did shock, therapy, shock economics there. That's the Jeffrey Sachs Chicago Boys policy. And then they did it for Russia, very famously for Russia was the Jeffrey Sachs. And that's where Oleg Deripaska comes in, because he's married to the daughter of Boris Yeltsin, and is part of what's called the cousinhood. And that was when Jeff Sachs went in there and with Larry Summers, and they were basically taking the assets, the nationalized assets of the Soviet Union, and then privatizing them and creating this oligarch system that we have now. So that's is that the plan for America to do sort of the same thing? It seems like that's kind of like what we're doing. But again, I look at Peter Thiel. He is he was an FBI informant, with Chuck Johnson and under a man named Jonathan Buma, who was the FBI counterintelligence person for 25 years, who's been arrested now. As he's arrested in July of 2025. He was the one that was working with Rudy Giuliani. If you remember, Rudy was going over to Ukraine and doing the deals with Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, with Moshe Osman, who was the rabbi of Ukraine that created that works with Kolomoisky. So all these characters are in the same groups, and the thing with Section 230, which is critical, is that it is based on the fact that AI is neutral, and that it does not have bias, which anybody that's read my AI marathon threads knows that that's my main thing, is that that's false. They do not give you standing. They remove standing. And even if you establish a first person family story user, the AI is allowed to omit that, downgrade your standing to a opinion or a feeling, or trying to determine intent, and it recategorizes your First Amendment protected words and changes them to opinion, that AI then can come in, it can fact check you, it can correct you, and to me that is completely omitted from Section 230. And that's the big problem with it. So that's why I've gone to the surety, learning about surety bonding and all this stuff, to make these agents accountable, make them not feel like they can just rely on speech and debate and attorney-client privilege, and that they need to be, they need to explain it the way they understand it, and not be allowed to mislead the population under a Smith-Mutt, where they can claim national security, you can only do that if there is a trusted oversight of that claim that national security is superior to the Bill of Rights and the bill, the rights of man and all of these um, basics, that they argue that because of national security that those things need to be placed aside because the security is too important and we can't tell you about it. And that's the problem, is that the system does not have a track record of trust building. So the expectation that we trust it is just completely unfair.
I've gone a few rounds with Grok. I don't go into the other ones just because I don't spend the time to do it. I appreciate what you've been working on. From my point of view, uh, usually when I ask a question that has anything to do with trying to sort out what my issues, who did what in regard to our national security and history, a lot of times, without my asking, they will add a little paragraph that will say, um, this is a conspiracy theory that has been promulgated through rumors on the internet. And I didn't ask whether it was a conspiracy theory or not. That wasn't part of my question. So I'd say, why are you giving me an answer that I didn't ask for? And they just give me a bunch of bobbly boop and all. And I said, well, look, from now on, I don't want you to tell me about conspiracy theories. I'll figure those out for myself. Thank you. And they said, okay, fine. Then the next time I ask is the same thing, same thing. I can't get past their desire to label something a conspiracy theory. And to me, that means that it's all part of the Alan Dulles, Frank Wisner, great Wurlitzer a program, now in AI, and I just don't buy that there is a real exception to the Bill of Rights, to the Constitution. There should not be an exception to it unless we're at war. And if Congress comes out and says we are at war against somebody or some country, then war is war. I mean, war is hell. Everybody knows that. And yeah, if we're at war, but heaven forbid we don't ever go to war again, because that war is going to be the last war, and that's going to be the end of everybody. That's why I don't understand how people cannot see things like Starmer and Macron and Mertz and them, and just lackeys for the big military industrial complex. And it's really hard to believe that anybody would want to have World War III, but I'm there. I believe that they really do want to have World War III, and they're setting up all of these constructs in anticipation that World War III is inevitable. And so that all of this stuff is a way for them to just really have a great sense of control over the demolition of the world, so that they survive and they own everything, and we won't be here to bother them anymore. I know that sounds dark and crazy, but David, I've been studying this stuff for a long time, and I really do believe that there are people, and go back to Curtis LeMay if you want, go back to Lemnitzer, and the people that Kennedy had to deal with, 7 days in May. This it has to be fiction, Dr. Strangelove, how I learned to stop worrying and love the bomb. Come on. We do need to worry, and we do need to stop pretending that national security means that we have to go up continually against the Constitution and pick apart all the good stuff that our country was founded to preserve.
Well, I think you made a very important point about the declaration of war and the legality of surveillance on the homeland in a period of war versus not a period of war. And the reason I think it's so important is because I think it helps explain the Kennedy assassination, because after JFK is murdered and publicly executed, there's not a declaration of war after that, right? We go into Vietnam, but it's a special action. So if there is a declaration of war, does that make things like the FBI surveillance, the Summer of Love, and all that in California, does that make that, is the pretext for that more stronger if Vietnam is declared a war? But it's not. It's a military, action. So they don't have the the surveillance in the homeland is illegal. And again, like that it's, to me, it's very basic, that, but that's the problem. And with the laws that you've talked about, like 10 slant 2, I mean, that's partly why I, you know, cite things, because Vannevar Bush was the head of National Defense Research Committee. The technical leader of it was Lita Bridge, who later goes to Caltech. The undersecretary, or the deputy of it, was Horace Rowland Gaither. Horace Rowland Gaither is the person that creates MITRE, Ford Foundation. He's the one that creates their international policy. And he also creates the Rand Corporation, which Curtis LeMay is one of the founders of, with Hap Arnold. So you also have Gaither later upgrading this to the Gaither document, which is written by who? Paul Nitze. Paul Nitze is the person that writes NSC 68 and Team B, creates Team B, which is later used when simultaneously after the Halloween massacre, after Nixon's resignation, Kissinger decides that George H.W. Bush is going to be the CIA director with Ted Shackley as the deputy. They create Team B at Harvard. So they have, Wolfowitz and Richard Pipes. And this is where all, the Kissinger's best friend, Guido Goldman, whose father was the founder of the World Jewish Congress that did the reparations of the Holocaust. He is at Harvard, starting a school with Miranda de Ginsburg, who's the sister of Charles and Edgar Brofman. So again, it's the same, group. And then Harvard HIID, they bring in the guy from University of Chicago, and they protest, no, we can't have University of Chicago because of the death squad. So what do? Instead, we bring in a young Larry Summers, who's the nephew of, two Nobel Prize winners. Paul Samuelson, his uncle, is the person that worked intimately with Milton Friedman. He wrote my college textbooks on economics. These are some of the superstars of economics.
Mine too, by the way. I read Samuelson.
They're great books, though. I love them. I mean, macroeconomics was the first class that I ever took in my life that I could just listen to the lecture and understand it, and I could explain it. I didn't have to study it or read the textbook. I could just watch the lecture, because to me, the basics of just supply and demand curves and financial accounting and the organization of that is the way my mind works. So for me, it was very natural. And so, I mean, Larry Summers, people know, he did his honeymoon, when he was the president of Harvard. He did the honeymoon on the Epstein Island and all this stuff. And he's the one that, shepherded Mark Zuckerberg for Facebook. And then, now he's injected himself into the OpenAI. He's, of course, the director of Genie Energy, which is Cheney and, Rupert Murdoch and Jacob Rothschild's dead now, but his son Nat Rothschild, who's best friends with Oleg Deripaska, they're all in this Genie Energy, and Genie Energy is doing the offshore oil and the East Med pipeline and Southwest Asia now. I mean, that's a major group that's doing energy and energy security globally, and that's it's the same group. So that's that's why I think the surety bond is the way to go, because it takes the problem with the AI is that it injects intent always. And intent in law and in debate is not fair play, because it downgrades the speaker's first person testimony to an opinion. And that is a disqualification in debate. Yet the AI is allowed to insert feels, vibes, and sounds like it can misrepresent personhood with no penalty. It's not required to remember standing in agency, even if it's established. It is allowed to omit that, even though that would provide context to exonerate somebody from like your experience where you say, well, the AI is saying I'm a conspiracy theorist. And from your study, conspiracy theory really was, whipped up as a strategy by Alan Dulles himself during the Warren Commission. So that, yes, that connection is there, but the founder of Silicon Valley is Frederick Terman. Terman was the head of the Harvard Radio Lab during World War II that worked with the MIT Rad Lab. So he took the patents of the Manhattan Project, and then he went to Stanford and started the Stanford Research Institute, which then brings in the David Packard and Hewlett Packard, and David Packard did the Packard Commission, which was another, that was sort of the follow-on of the, once they created the petrodollar system, they bring in David Packard for the Packard Commission. So the combination of technology and governance and security is, to me, it's the funnel of it is at Harvard and MIT, at least during World War II, and then they split it out. But the MITRE, which Horace Roland Gaither created, that was the extension of the Hanscom Air Force Base, where they were doing the radar, and later that's where Bob Malone and Daryl Rickey are doing this PRISM, which is the DNA database system that's being done at Hanscom, part of MITRE. So it's the same characters over and over again, and I don't know. I mean, it's so I guess the bottom line is that the Section 230 uses what I think is a falsehood in their language, misstating that AI is neutral and therefore is immune from these liabilities. And my argument is that is absolutely false, pattern and practice, absolutely predictable, that it is biased. It does want to take it wants to take editorial control, even if you establish that it's a first person story and they're just there to help organize and structure your words. It doesn't do that. And that to me is a big problem, because AI has been created to remove liability from the officers and the engineers of the corporations that create the AI products. And that again, to me, is defeating the spirit of common understanding and common rules that everyone can understand, and then modify their behavior based on an understood rule system that doesn't have selective rule enforcement.
So important. This is a discussion I'm so glad we're having, and I didn't ever think anywhere nearly as deeply about that as you have, David. When we say AI sovereignty, what you've been talking about is personal sovereignty, the ability to tell your story in your own way and not have it nudged by an AI that wants it to be a little bit different. Or to undercut your credibility by taking away your foundation of authority for speaking on it, even if it's a family matter, as you say. I have seen the sovereignty question from a different point of view, and that is, can Canada pass a law that says AI in Canada will have to pass through our board of examiners, and we're going to decide whether this or that thing is acceptable on our AI, and build a barrier against this, what appears to be already completely absorbed all around the world, this phenomenon of AI. To what extent have you considered that aspect of it as far as national sovereignty?
Well, I think about it a lot, because the Saline, Michigan data center is right on the border of Canada. And of course, where I live in Detroit, Michigan, Windsor is the busiest international border in the world. And we have we just built a new Gordie Howe Bridge, and So
What did
that's
Trump say about it? He said he wanted us to own both ends of it or something.
well,
Something.
the other thing that is never spoken about is that the Michigan Central Railroad, which the Fords just bought and redid the train station, they had a proprietary tunnel, which you know was that the national security fiber tunnel between Canada and America. I mean, I know we have the Five Eyes relationship, but that's again, we're talking about Ford Foundation. Horace Roland Gaither created the Ford Foundation. People that know the Ford Motor Company history know that Henry Ford went down as the great anti-Semite with Charles Lindbergh, and then Edsel, was the Playboy son, and they were, built the Willow Run, and then Edsel died, and then Henry was old, and Edsel's widow did not like Henry, and so they instead had her son, Hank the Deuce, Henry Ford II, come in as a 27-year-old. And what did they do? They brought in the whiz kids to help him, to provide the support. And who was the person that brought in the whiz kids? Sidney Weinberg, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, was the person that influenced that. And he also is the person that had Eisenhower's ear when he was the Columbia president. He was the one that gave him the business contact, because Eisenhower was a career military man and didn't know the banking and the corporate world at all. So Sidney Weinberg was the one that integrated him. And who did he pair him with? Engine Charlie Wilson, the chairman of General Motors. What did he do? He became the Secretary of Defense with Alan Dulles, the CIA director, and John Foster Dulles, the Secretary of State. And what did they put in? New Look. That was the beginning of New Look, and that's General Motors. And of course, the Undersecretary of War was Richard Keyes, who is a family acquaintance of ours, and he lived on the Cranbrook campus. And Charles Lindbergh and Ann Morrow lived in that house when their kids went to Brookside, where my nephew is a student right now. So all that is part of the history, and like I'm honored when I go over to the grandparents' day at Brookside, and the special friend and the one of George Goff Booth's grandsons is telling me the story about how his father was the one that gave Charles Lindbergh flying lessons, and he was a scaredy cat when he first started flying with his grandpa. And he is the one that owns the Cranbrook Press. And he told me that he's going to give me the Cranbrook Press. He hasn't done it yet, but that is it. I know most people don't understand what that is, but that is, so to me, was the most stamping of my work that I could have ever gotten, because the Cranbrook Press was based off of the Clarendon Press that was created by William Morris and John Ruskin. And Peter Duke is talking a lot about John Ruskin right now, because he was the Oxford president that was the mentor to Cecil Rhodes and Alfred Milner.
You're talking
And they,
about John Ruskin of the anti of the pre-Raphaelite art Ruskin.
well, this is the history of it. So they created William Morris created the wallpaper company, and they were doing woodblock cuts to make prints of wallpaper, and they created what's called the arts and crafts movement. The Cranbrook School is the American Arts and Crafts School. So George Goff Booth wanted to make an arts and crafts school. The Cranbrook, the reason why Charles Lindbergh and Ann Morrow came to Cranbrook, and Uncle Henry Booth is the one that brought them there, is because Lindbergh's kid had been killed, right? I mean, he was in New Jersey. Ann Morrow was the wife. Her dad is Robert Morrow, who's the senator from New Jersey, and he's the banker for J.P. Morgan. He is the person that, as the Skull and Bonesman, he's the one that gave Henry Luce the money to start Time magazine. And he is also the person that was the head of the very first aviation unit in 1914 or whatever, when the federal government decided they were going to go into aviation. It was Morrow. And then he's the one that was the ambassador in Mexico that, finds Diego Rivera. He has Diego Rivera do commissions. His daughter meets Charles Lindbergh when he's doing a, flight demonstration in Mexico. And then, of course, Rivera then comes to Detroit, and Corky, your friend, is the expert on this, because he's knows about the about the mural of industries in Detroit, which is very famous. And the thing that I just discovered, which is horrifying, is that there's a Park Davis baby, a magi scene in the mural. So about 90% of it is the Ford Rouge plant, and so you
Do they
see.
have a new? Does he have a hypodermic?
Oh yeah, it's
Uh
being
huh.
injected, and so Jane Harlow was the model of the nurse. Valentiner, who was the director of the DIA that brought Rivera and then had Edsel Ford, as the patron that paid for it. He is the doctor. They have a Jewish, a Catholic, and a Protestant magi around the baby. And who is the baby styled after? The Lindbergh baby. So
Oh,
that's and who is the pharmaceutical company? It's Park Davis Pharmaceutical. The Park Davis is critical in the history of law as far as medicines in the United States, patent law with medicine. They had the patent to do cocaine, like Merck had heroin. Park Davis did cocaine. They had Aleister Crowley come to Detroit in the teens to get peyote preparation synthesized for his whole occultic stuff. And the person that introduced my mom and dad was Harvey Merker, who was the chief chemist of Park Davis. And they were, lived on Lakeside. They were the next door neighbor of Charles Coughlin. And my dad was the paper boy for them. So and my grandma that died, that I showed the picture last time,
yeah.
she's the one that was friends with them. She was the chemist. She was the one that had the brother, the father, the grandfather, great grandfather. They were all Michigan doctors going back to the very beginning of Michigan Medical School. And she was a chemist. She worked at the Mott Hospital. That was when Thomas Francis and Jonas Salk were working there. Salk was working with Park Davis for the, polio vaccine. So all this stuff is so it's just so personal because the Selene data center, it's DTE that's giving the ex parte credits. I mean, that's Alex Dow, the man that hired my great grandpa, is also the person that introduced Henry Ford to Thomas Edison in 1898 when Ford said he was going to start the car business. So that's the background of it, and so I don't. So that's why you know it's I can remember it all because it's all so personal, but it's also like really sad for me because it really emphasizes that yes, my family was the one that was in these groups, and that in a three-way fight, it appears that two decided to team up against my family always, and then later, 50 years later, they start fighting each other, and it seems like the unspoken is the whole reason we're fighting is because the original person we wiped out is so awful, and that's how I feel because I have all these people around me and nobody I get the very subtle things like the Cranbrook Press, which was so meaningful, but most people give absolutely no um, recognition. Even people that listen to me on the calls for years, where I talk for hours, will act like they don't remember a thing I say. Oh, it's too confusing. I can't keep track of it. And to me, that was the that I hated it in retrospect, but it taught me to it really taught me to think about the AI and the system. And the bottom line is the AI, the logic of AI is based off of the OSS Simple Sabotage Manual. So if you look at the Simple Sabotage Manual and the techniques it uses, where it's death by 1,000 cuts, it's nothing massive and kinetic where you can say, oh, it's it's the plausible deniability. It's a million little things that erodes standing in agency, and the person's credibility is the target. And I feel like these AI laws is the codification of the erosion of the Bill of Rights for people, and I think it's a huge risk. I think it's a risk to the world, and that's why I'm trying to talk to you about it and your audience, and try to get people thinking about it because I feel like the Alyssa Slotkin solution is something real. She's a senator right now. She was speaking about presidential immunity law right now. She's on this topic, but she needs to expand it, and she needs to make an offering of her own protections. And everybody needs to be bare and discuss it without protections. And that's, to me, the only way.
Is there any way she would watch this show?
Her fourth grade teacher was Charlie's last year, and she loves Alyssa. Her brother, I used to trade baseball cards with him. I did sleepovers there. I mean, the people are go to the the aliens and all these lizard people stuff, and the thing is, I grew up around all these people. I didn't ever hear any of this stuff, but you know my as I go through the history of things, though, I mean, my family is everywhere around all these occultic organizations. I mean, even I mean, going back to Francis Bacon and Thomas D and Walsingham and all the people that created the encryption and signal com stuff, like that's, they're right in there with them. So that's why, for me, it's very exciting to go through and try to, solve the riddles and read the signals and stuff, and teach people. That's what I really want to do, is have common understanding, because I feel like I feel like my family is just small group, and there's five of us, and we don't have anything but common understanding to help us.
Well, you do have each other, and that's wonderful. I just make a comment. When you mentioned the OSS, was it assassination manual? What's it
It's
called?
called simple sabotage.
Simple sabotage. I have it over there on the shelf. It is from the OSS, which means it is from William Donovan, and this is the Donovan that you know i- is trained and brings in British consultants to teach our good American boys how to be, ruthless killers. And that to me ties in a big way this whole discussion we've just had, because what we've done here is fleshed out many aspects of what Horace Rowan Gaither's stated goal is, and that is to reduce the, the people of the United States to a level that is compatible with the people of Soviet Russia at the time. And that, to me, is the only reason you would want to do that. It's not just mean to take away our stuff the way they've done and send it to China or whatever, but it's also to level out the population in terms of its power, so that a person in the United States, right, in 1950 would have had a ton more power than a person in China at the same time. But now look at the economies, look at how things have been changing. And not only is it scary that the United States may fall due to the pressure on the dollar and the economy, but it's also an indication that they're succeeding. And that all of these, horrible things that they do behind the scenes under national security are knitting together a world in which they will have total control, that they will have that technate that Elon Musk's grandfather wrote about. And so all of this stuff ties together in a very compelling way. The circumstantial evidence of all of these things points in the same direction, and that is there is an elite group that is trying to control the entire world and get away with it before we find out. So
So, and the name of it is called Monet and Monroe. It's a bank that was Jean Monnet, that was the founder of the European Union, and he
you
teamed
mean
with.
Jean Monnet of Le Cercle
Yeah, and he
the
had
creepy
his
French guys? Yeah.
yeah, and his lawyer, of course, is John Foster Dulles, and they're partnered with the Wallenbergs and the Bosches and TV Sung and Chiang Kai-shek. And again, the thing people forget is that TV Sung, who is married to a Sung sister, or I mean,
To
uh,
Chang's sister.
H.H. Kung, who is the Confucius, 75th descendant of Confucius, and married one of the Sung sisters, he was the head of the Chinese bank for the Mao Zedong. So you had one brother in law that is the banker for communist China, and then the KMT, Chiang Kai-shek, with H.H. Kung, who finances the Flying Tigers and everything. in the same Monet Monroe with the Wallenbergs and with John Foster Dulles. So that's the area to look at for everybody is Monet and Monroe, and they are the globalists, and they were doing these um, sovereignty plays where they were going into the countries and they were building out the railroad and the ports and controlling. They knew where the bottlenecks were in the system, and they went and they developed those and protected them. So that's what they do.
One more suggestion, I see that AI has gotten really good, and YouTube is very good at creating transcripts. And you might want to try to pull a transcript of this and send the transcript to that was she a congresswoman?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, maybe cut out the personal stuff, but you make some fascinating points that are all very important, but need fleshing out. You need to, what are you talking about? Agency. What are you talking about? Surety. Give but I know that you are heading in the right direction with this. So, David, thank you so much, and Godspeed to you. Come back again soon, will you?
All right, anytime, John. Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody. Have a great afternoon. I will see you on Friday. I don't know if I'll do a show on Thursday or not yet, but I will definitely be here with Marcia for our Friday wrap up.